I never imagined that a single weekend trip could alter the way I saw myself, or the people I thought I knew best. My name is Ethan, and I've always been the quiet one in my family. My brother Ryan, on the other hand, is the opposite of me in every possible way: confident, charming, and effortlessly social. People gravitate toward him the way light pulls in moths. Growing up, I admired him, even envied him, but I also lived in his shadow. So when Ryan asked me to join him and his friends on a road trip to the mountains, I didn't hesitate. It felt like a rare invitation into his world, a chance to belong, to be seen. He said it would be fun, just a few days away from everything. "You need to get out of your comfort zone," he joked, tossing me the car keys. I smiled, pretending not to be nervous. Deep down, I wondered if I'd fit in with his confident friends. The morning we left, the air smelled like rain and freedom. Ryan's old Jeep was packed with bags, snacks, and loud laughter. His friends, Liam and Noah, were already inside when I climbed in. Liam greeted me first, his voice calm and friendly. He had a quiet confidence that felt different from Ryan's energy. When our eyes met, he smiled, not a teasing one like Ryan's friends usually gave me, but something softer, warmer. The drive stretched for hours through winding roads and endless green. Music played low from Ryan's playlist, songs from their college days. Ryan and Noah argued about which trail to hike first, while I leaned my head against the window, letting the rhythm of the car drown my thoughts. Every now and then, Liam would ask me something, simple questions, like what I did for work or what kind of books I liked. But it was the way he listened that caught me off guard. When I spoke, he really heard me. By the time we reached the cabin nestled between the trees, the sun had dipped low behind the peaks. The air was cooler, and a faint mist clung to the pine branches. The cabin wasn't fancy, just wood, stone, and silence, but it felt alive in a way the city never did. Ryan took charge, handing out rooms, cracking jokes, and lighting a fire. Noah unpacked food while Liam helped me carry bags inside. "You don't talk much, do you?" Liam said, holding the door for me. I laughed lightly. "Ryan does enough talking for both of us." He smiled, that quiet kind of smile again. "Yeah, he does." Later that evening, we sat outside around a small fire pit. Ryan's girlfriend Emily arrived unexpectedly. He hadn't mentioned she was coming. Her presence changed the dynamic instantly. She was kind, but her arrival seemed to make Ryan show off more: louder laughter, bigger stories, constant glances in her direction. I sat across from them, watching as she leaned on his shoulder, laughing at every word. Liam sat beside me, silent but observant. The crackle of the fire filled the spaces between us. Every so often, our eyes met through the flickering light. There was no need for words, it was a moment of quiet understanding. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't dare to assume. Still, I couldn't ignore how calm I felt near him, as if the noise around us faded whenever he looked my way. As the night deepened, Noah pulled out a guitar and began to play softly. Emily hummed along, Ryan sang off-key, and everyone laughed. I noticed Liam watching the flames instead, his thoughts seemingly far away. When I offered him a blanket, he hesitated before taking it, brushing my hand slightly. It was unintentional, or maybe it wasn't, but it sent a strange pulse through me. A cool wind swept through the clearing. Ryan and Emily went inside first, their laughter echoing faintly from the cabin. Noah followed soon after, muttering about getting more firewood for tomorrow. Then it was just me and Liam. He leaned back, staring at the stars. "You ever feel like you're surrounded by people but still, invisible?" His question startled me. It was too close to home. I nodded slowly. "All the time." He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. I thought I was the only one who felt that way. Neither of us said anything more. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, alive with things neither of us could name. When I finally stood to leave, he whispered, almost to himself, "Good night, Ethan." That night, lying in the small cabin room, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that conversation, that look, that fleeting touch. Something had shifted, subtle, invisible, but powerful that I didn't know it then, but that moment by the fire was the beginning of everything that would follow. By the third day, the rhythm of Ryan's house had adjusted to include me, and that realization unsettled me more than I expected. I moved through the rooms as if I belonged there, anticipating the creak of the hallway floor and the hum of the refrigerator at night. Ryan noticed it too. He joked about how easily I'd settled in, but his smile carried a question he didn't voice. Our conversations grew heavier, weighted with pauses and meaning. We spoke less about work and more about feelings we had both avoided naming in our own lives. Ryan confessed that his relationship with Mark had become routine, defined more by habit than connection. He said he felt guilty for even admitting it, yet relief followed every word. I listened, offering understanding, and with each exchange, the line between support and dependence thinned that I began to catch myself waiting for his messages when we were in separate rooms, my phone lighting up like a small confession. There was nothing romantic in the words themselves, just check-ins, shared jokes, fragments of thought, but I hid my screen when notifications appeared. That secrecy was the first undeniable sign that something was wrong. Emotional honesty, when paired with concealment, becomes a quiet betrayal. Ryan noticed the change in me as well. One afternoon, while we sat on the back porch watching the sky darken with approaching rain, he asked if I ever felt like I was living someone else's life, waiting for permission to claim my own. The question felt too precise to be casual. I answered truthfully, admitting that I often felt invisible, even to myself. His response was immediate and intense. He said he saw me, that he always had since we started talking more. The words lingered between us, heavy with implication. That night, Ryan admitted what he had been circling for days. He told me he was confused by his feelings, not just about his relationship with Mark, but about the way my presence affected him. He was careful, emphasizing that nothing physical had happened and that he didn't want it to. Yet his voice betrayed him. Confusion, when shared, can feel like an invitation even when it's framed as a warning that I wanted to be the responsible one. I wanted to remind him of Mark, of loyalty, of the consequences neither of us could escape. Instead, I asked questions that kept the conversation alive. I told myself I was helping him think clearly, but deep down I knew I was feeding my own need to feel chosen. That realization made me uncomfortable, but not enough to stop. The tension reached its peak during a moment that should have been insignificant. We were standing in the kitchen late at night, the house quiet except for the ticking clock. Ryan stood closer than necessary as he handed me a glass of water. Our hands brushed briefly, unintentionally. The contact was innocent, fleeting, yet it sent a jolt through me that felt anything but. We both froze, aware of the weight we had placed on such a small gesture. Ryan stepped back first. He apologized, his tone tight with restraint. I nodded, grateful and disappointed at the same time. That was the moment I understood how close we were to crossing a line neither of us could uncross. Restraint, I realized, doesn't erase desire, it only makes it louder. The following morning, reality intruded in the form of a phone call. Mark's name appeared on Ryan's screen while we sat together at the table. Ryan hesitated before answering, and that pause told me everything. His voice shifted as he spoke to her, becoming lighter, more distant. I felt like an intruder in a space I had no right to occupy, witnessing the cost of what we were doing without fully acknowledging it. After the call ended, Ryan looked exhausted. He didn't explain, and I didn't ask. We both understood that the situation had grown fragile, stretched thin by unspoken truths. I suggested I might leave earlier than planned, testing the idea aloud. Ryan didn't respond immediately, and his silence felt like another confession. That evening, alone again in the guest room, I confronted the reality I had been avoiding. Whatever we called it, connection, understanding, comfort, it had become an emotional affair, one that threatened to damage lives beyond our own. I knew that staying meant risking more than heartbreak. It meant becoming someone I didn't want to be. As I lay awake, the house no longer felt warm or welcoming. It felt like a threshold, and I stood on the wrong side of it, aware that the next choice I made would define not just how this visit ended, but who I would be afterward. Morning arrived with the slow gentleness of regret. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest damp and shimmering under thin strands of sunlight. The cabin was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood. Ethan woke early, his mind still tangled in fragments of the night before, Noah's words, the silence that followed, and the undeniable truth he could no longer ignore that he sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the faint sound of water dripping from the eaves outside. Everything felt heavier, as if the air itself had absorbed their unspoken confession. He wasn't sure what frightened him more, what had been revealed, or what it meant about himself. When Ethan stepped into the kitchen, Noah was already there, standing by the stove, making coffee. His back was turned, posture rigid, shoulders tight. He didn't look up when Ethan entered. "Morning," Ethan said, voice hesitant. "Morning," Noah replied softly, still facing the window. The usual warmth in his tone was gone, replaced by something cautious, fragile. Liam stumbled out of his room moments later, yawning loudly, breaking the tension without realizing it. "You two are up early," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Guess I slept through the storm." Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, you did." Noah poured the coffee into 3 mismatched mugs and handed one to Liam, another to Ethan. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Ethan felt that same quiet electricity rush through him again, quick, uninvited, impossible to ignore. Breakfast passed in strained normalcy. Liam talked about plans for their drive back, the traffic, the weather, every topic safe and surface level. Ethan responded when necessary, but his mind drifted. Every glance toward Noah was a reminder of the space that had opened between them, and how easily it could break everything if either of them crossed it again. After clearing the dishes, Liam went outside to check the car. As soon as the door closed, Noah finally spoke. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. "About last night," he began. Ethan looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time that morning. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan said quickly, though he wanted him to. Noah shook his head. "No, I do. I shouldn't have said what I said. It wasn't fair to you." Ethan hesitated. "It wasn't wrong either." Noah's gaze softened. "Maybe not. But it complicates things." Ethan nodded slowly. "Things were already complicated. We just stopped pretending they weren't." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence carried an odd kind of understanding, one that didn't need words. Whatever had existed between them now lived in that space, quiet and unacknowledged but undeniably real. When Liam called from outside, they both startled slightly, breaking eye contact. "Car's ready." Liam shouted through the door, "Coming." Noah answered quickly. They packed their things in near silence. Every shared glance carried the weight of what couldn't be said. On the drive back, Liam filled the car with stories and laughter, trying to recapture the carefree rhythm from before. But Ethan barely heard him. His eyes occasionally drifted to the passenger seat, where Noah stared out the window, lost in his own thoughts. The forest gave way to the open road, then to stretches of farmland and quiet towns. It felt like traveling not just through distance, but through everything unspoken between them. When they finally reached the city, Liam dropped Ethan off first. "Good trip, huh?" Liam said, grinning. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "It was." Noah turned slightly, managing a small, uncertain smile. "Take care, okay?" Ethan nodded. "You too." As the car pulled away, Ethan stood on the curb, watching until it disappeared from view. A strange stillness settled over him, not emptiness, but acceptance. The trip had given him something he hadn't expected, not love, not closure, but truth. That evening, alone in his apartment, he opened his journal, something he hadn't done in years, and began to write. He wrote about how love sometimes arrives disguised as confusion, how silence can hold entire conversations, and how truth, once seen, can never be unseen. That he ended the entry with a line that felt like both confession and release. "That trip didn't break us, it revealed us." Sometimes, love doesn't ask to be understood. It only asks to be honest. He closed the journal and sat in the fading light, a faint sense of peace settling over him. Whatever had happened between him and Noah would remain theirs, a quiet story written between heartbeats, carried forward not with regret, but with understanding. and though that night changed everything, it also set me free. Time didn't soften the memory the way I expected it to. Instead, it sharpened it, stripping away excuses until only intention remained. Weeks after I left Ryan's house, I found myself replaying the smallest details, the pauses in conversation, the looks that lingered too long, the silence that carried more meaning than words. Distance had given me clarity, but it hadn't given me peace. Ryan reached out again, this time asking if we could talk. His message was brief, careful, and respectful of the boundary I had tried to establish. I hesitated before replying, aware that reopening communication could unravel the fragile resolve I'd built. Still, avoidance had never been my strength, and I agreed to a call. When Ryan's voice came through the line, it sounded steadier than before, but also older, as if the situation had aged him. He explained that he and Mark had officially ended their relationship. There was no drama in his account, no blame assigned. He spoke about realizing how emotionally distant he had been long before I arrived, how our connection had only exposed a fracture that already existed. I listened without interrupting, resisting the urge to take responsibility for a decision that wasn't mine alone. Ryan was honest about his confusion. He said that meeting me had forced him to confront parts of himself he'd ignored, questions about identity and emotional fulfillment he'd postponed answering. He was clear about one thing, though: he didn't want to repeat the same mistake by leaning on me for clarity. That admission surprised me. It was the first time he'd acknowledged the imbalance we created. That I told him I appreciated his honesty but needed distance. Not because I was angry, but because I was still learning how to trust my own boundaries. Ryan accepted that without protest. Before ending the call, he thanked me, not for what we almost became, but for walking away when it mattered. The gratitude felt undeserved, yet sincere. After the call, I sat with a realization that unsettled me: closure isn't always about resolution, sometimes it's about restraint. I had wanted a definitive ending, a moment that would justify the emotional turmoil. Instead, I was left with something quieter, a mutual understanding that some paths are best left unexplored. That I and the days that followed, I noticed a shift in myself. I was more deliberate in my interactions, more attentive to emotional signals I'd previously ignored. When loneliness crept in, I faced it directly rather than seeking comfort in borrowed intimacy. I spoke openly with my friend Daniel, who reminded me that growth often feels like loss before it feels like progress. Ryan didn't contact me again, and I didn't reach out. The silence between us felt intentional, protective rather than cold. It allowed both of us to move forward without rewriting the past or romanticizing what never truly existed. Yet the experience lingered, not as regret, but as a question I carried quietly: how many times had I mistaken emotional closeness for destiny? The answer didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded gradually, through choices that prioritized integrity over impulse. Looking back, I understood that the visit to Ryan's house wasn't the story's climax, it was its catalyst. It revealed vulnerabilities I needed to address and boundaries I needed to define. The change it caused wasn't dramatic or visible to others, but it was profound all the same. As I stepped into new chapters of my life, I carried that awareness with me. I knew now that connection, when pursued without honesty, can become its own form of betrayal. And while this chapter had ended quietly, its lesson continued to shape the decisions ahead, reminding me that the most important transformations often begin where temptation is resisted, not embraced.